I want to know who is to blame for the fall of the Western Roman Empire. And in this video I want to discuss what does it take to be an emperor. In the last years of the Western Roman Empire, there were many people that could not become emperor. They tried and they failed over and over and over again. And the question is, why did it fail? Why they were not capable of becoming one of those emperors that reunite the Western Roman Empire? That's the question that I want to explore a little bit. But first of all, let's speak about Valentinian, the last Roman emperor that had control over everything, or it has some sort of control. Valentinian, he was killed. Why was he killed? Well, he was killed because he killed Aetius, a Roman general. So basically, Valentinian killed Aetius, and then some men kill Valentinian because he killed Aetius. And that's pretty much it. To give some information about this whole thing, the reason why Valentinian killed Aetius was about jealousy, but let's remember, or let's have in mind, that Aetius was not precisely a friend, the best friend of the imperial throne. So he did some things that are not really, that were not really nice to the throne. So it is not like Valentinian out of nowhere decided to just kill Aetius. He had some reasons. We might disagree with the reasons, and certainly the time was a little bit off, because by the time that Valentinian decides to kill Aetius, Aetius was really popular because they just came out of a war where Aetius was successful, so his popularity was really big. So it was certainly a mistake, but what are you going to do? So Valentinian is killed. Next we have Petronius Maximus. What does it take to be an emperor? Petronius's idea is to pretty much marry the ex-wife of the wife of Valentinian, and to marry the daughter of Valentinian to his son. So that's the idea. So does it take to marrying into imperial blood? Does it take that to become an emperor? And the answer is no. So the daughter of Valentinian, the ex-emperor, she was supposed to marry the Vandal. I think that it was either the Vandal prince or the Vandal niece, something. It was the grandson, maybe. I'm not sure. I don't remember. It was a relative to the Vandals, to the Vandal royal blood, and because Petronius Maximus decided to marry his son to the daughter of Valentinian, now the Vandals couldn't marry into their royal blood, and that was a big problem, that was a big issue. Then this is why the Vandals invaded Italy. When the Vandals go to Italy, this is where we have one of these famous sacks of Rome of 455, where the sacking was very thorough. As a consequence, before the Vandals even go in, I think that it was before the Vandals actually invade, pretty much Petronius Maximus is killed, because the problems, this invasion, the famine that happened because of the Vandals cutting the food supply. You have to remember that the Vandals control Africa, and Africa was the food supply of Rome, so the Vandals pretty much could starve Rome. And that's pretty much what happened. And this is why Petronius Maximus' reign was extremely short. So he is killed. I believe he is thrown to the Tiber River, and I think he only rules 3 months, so not a lot. Then we move on to Avidius. Avidius was pretty much a puppet. He is an older gentleman, and who knows why they chose him. The Visigoths were the ones who put him in the throne, so probably he was just friendly to the Visigoths. I do not know. We do not know. He was just an older gentleman who had the support of the Visigoths, and if you wanted to be an emperor, you certainly needed the support of the Visigoths because they were extremely powerful. But slowly but surely, he also lost support of the people. Why did he lose support of the people? Well, because the Vandals didn't like the Visigoths. So you have to remember that by the end of the Western Roman Empire, the Visigoths, the Roman emperor needed to be in good terms with the Visigoths and with the Vandals. But these two people were in odds with each other. They were fighting each other. They used to fight each other. During the 430s, the Visigoths and the Vandals actually used to be at war with each other, fighting over the province of Hispania. So they are not friends, and because Avidius is put there by the Visigoths, the Vandals don't like that. It's pretty much putting someone, is like letting your enemy put someone in charge that you might not like. So the Vandals do what they do best, which is cut the supply of food from Italy, starve the people, and then the people get mad with whoever is in charge, in this case Avidius. The Vandals tried to invade Italy as they did in 455, but they fail. The reason they fail is because Ricimer and Majorian stop the invasion of the Vandals. So even though the strategy of starving is very effective, in this case in particular, they failed to invade because they were just stopped by Ricimer and Majorian. So what happened next? Well, what happened next is that the people are really angry. They're really angry with Avidius because, when you are starving, you get angry with whoever is ruling. You're going to get mad with them because, you're starving, you're hungry, basically. So Ricimer and Majorian take that opportunity and they dethrone Avidius. Now, they don't kill Avidius. The reason they don't kill him is probably because he was just a puppet, so they let him go. Some sources say that he was killed, but I think that, well, from the book that I read, which is Thomas Hawking, Italy and Her Invaders, that he believes that they didn't kill Avidius. They just let him go and he died from old age. Let's remember that he was an older gentleman, so that's what happened to Avidius. Now, Ricimer and Majorian decide, I'm not sure how that decision went, but they decide that they are going to crown Majorian emperor, and that's what they do. So this is where we have Majorian as emperor. But now again we have the same problem. We have the Vandals that have not been consulted, so they didn't have a say in the matter of the emperor. So would they be friendly? Maybe, maybe not. We have the Visigoths, So we have problems there because the guy that was put in place by the Visigoths just got kicked out by the person that now has declared himself emperor. So we have another problem there. So Majorian decides to go to war, and this is where we have the emperor soldier once again, and this is why people get really hyped up about it, because he was able to actually not only declare himself emperor, but actually he was able to fight. And he not only was able to fight, but he was able to fight effectively. He goes to Gaul, where the Visigoths were stationed, or where they lived, and he beat them and he conquered them. He tried to do the same thing to the Vandals, but he failed. Famously, the ships that he was preparing for the invasion of Africa, they were burned down. So sadly, it was not meant to be. Majorian is killed. Why was Majorian killed? Many people say that Majorian was killed because of jealousy. Ricimer was jealous because Majorian kept on winning battles, battle after battle after battle, and he became too powerful, and Ricimer pretty much disliked that. There are many reasons why Ricimer decided to kill Majorian. It's not clear, at least to me, if it was just jealousy. Of course, that could be a factor in whether or not he decided to kill Majorian. There is also the factor of alliances between these different peoples. So Majorian allied himself with the Visigoths, which it was a big no-no for Ricimer, because Ricimer was tied to the Suevi and the Burgundians. Those were other Germanic tribes, and those Germanic tribes were enemies of the Visigoths because they were fighting each other. The Suevi were fighting over control of Africa, and the Burgundians were fighting over some control of, Gaul, of northern Gaul, which is northern France today. So you have some conflict of interest between Ricimer and Majorian. You have those things, and you also have the problem that Majorian just tried to invade Africa and the Vandals. What do you think the Vandals are going to do next? Well, they are going to pretty much produce famine, because the Vandals still control Africa and they still control the food supplies of Rome, so they could either starve Italy or they could also drive the prices up. So in any case, the failed invasion of Majorian was really bad for Italy, because it meant either starvation or prices going up in retaliation. So the death of Majorian could have been asked by the Suevi, which is actually a source, a really old book written in Latin, says that the reason Majorian was killed was because of the Suevi. So it was a request from the Suevi, which I'm not sure about that. I don't think historians make that claim, but that's an old book and that's a thing. It could have been asked by the Burgundians as well, and it could have been asked by the Vandals. Let's remember, Majorian was against a lot of people. He was fighting a lot of people. So is it a stretch to think that more than one people wanted Majorian dead? The answer is no, of course not. And Ricimer pretty much decided to throw him under the bus, pretty much. And Well, many people might disagree with Ricimer's decision, but he kept on ruling Italy, so he, for himself, he did something right, because I think that he lived for another 15 years. So Ricimer certainly did something right for himself, maybe not for the empire, but for himself. We cannot argue that he did something wrong. The next emperor is Livius Severus. So Livius Severus is just a puppet of Ricimer. He doesn't, there's nothing much to say about him. He was chosen because he will be a nice figure. He's a puppet. There's nothing to say about him. Ricimer did all of the work. So during this time, so Livius Severus ruled for about 4 years before he died, and during all of this time, Ricimer did the fighting, and Ricimer was pretty much in charge. Nobody disputes that. So as an emperor, he was just a good puppet, and pretty much he died from old age. Now, some people say that Ricimer killed him. Whether that's true, whether that's correct, we do not know. We cannot know. He was also an older gentleman, so it could have been that he just passed away. We do not know. We're not sure. It could have been that he killed him like he did Majorian. I think that because Ricimer killed Majorian and people really dislike that, people even hate Ricimer because of that, they are really inclined to believe that he also killed Livius Severus. So, but you know, it is possible, but you know, who knows, you know. The next emperor is Anthemius. Now, Anthemius is a little bit different than Livius Severus because he's not a puppet, or at least he's not as much of a puppet. So he was a rich man from the Eastern Roman Empire. He had a relationship with the Eastern Imperial throne. I don't remember exactly what the relationship was, but he had a relationship. So this was the Ricimer choosing Anthemius as emperor is some sort of compromise between, I shouldn't say compromise, but it is an attempt to amend the relationship between the Eastern Roman Empire and the Western Roman Empire. And did it work? The answer is no, it didn't work. So what happened next is that Anthemius tried to invade the Vandals. We have to remember there's always this question of the time of the Romans of Italy that they needed to conquer Africa back, because again the Vandals control Africa and they control the food supply. What that means is that the Vandals could either hump up the price of food, or they could starve Italy, and either of those things is very bad. So you needed to control Africa, you needed to retake the province of Africa if you wanted to rule Italy. And that's what Anthemius tried to do, but he failed. We don't get much details about that. We just know that he tried and he failed. This is where we have a little bit of paranoia from Anthemius. So we are told that Anthemius got sick from eating something and he blamed Ricimer. He blamed him. He said that he was trying to poison him, which maybe not. So this distrust pretty much drives the two men to battle. I don't know if I should say civil war, but they fight each other, and ultimately Ricimer won. So the relationship between Anthemius and Ricimer was always tense, and it was unsuccessful again because Anthemius was not successful at winning battles. Thus far, we can clearly see that if you want to be a Western Roman emperor, you need to do a lot of winning, which not many emperors are doing right now. Majorian did a lot of winning, but sadly he didn't win when he went against the Vandals, and pretty much it looks that if you want to win, if you want to become a Roman emperor, you need to beat the Vandals, and it seems like that's not going to happen. Anthemius fails to take Africa. He fights with Ricimer. Ricimer wins, and now we need to choose another emperor once again. The next emperor is Olybrius. So Olybrius is a relative. I think he was the son-in-law of the king of the Vandals. So Ricimer is still trying. We can clearly see that Ricimer is trying to handle this question of what should we do with this Vandal question. The Vandals, we need to conquer them, we need to defeat them, but we keep failing. So Ricimer, obviously maybe tired of trying to do so, he decides to maybe have some sort of relationship with the Vandals, and he decides to put in the imperial throne, a Vandal relative of the king, which he was the son-in-law of the Vandal king. Sadly, 2 months after Olybrius is declared emperor, he dies. Why does he die? The answer is rather simple. He dies from sickness. He didn't have good eating habits and he passed away. And he was not precisely young as well. Olybrius was an older gentleman with some questionable eating habits, and that's why he goes away. He passed away. Now, many people, and Thomas Hawkins, the guy who I read for the Fall of Rome, and the guy who I owed all of my knowledge of the Fall of Rome, he pretty much says that if Ricimer were still alive, he would have been blamed for the death of Olybrius. And that is correct. But sadly, for us, Ricimer died like a month before Olybrius. So Ricimer declares Olybrius emperor, Ricimer dies, then Emperor Olybrius dies. So it's just unfortunate, it's just a bad set of events. The next emperor is Glucerius. Who is Glucerius? And the answer is, who knows? We do not know. We know him by name. So what happened is that when Ricimer dies, I think that it is a nephew. I don't remember exactly. I think he was Gundobad. He was a nephew of Ricimer, or he was a relative of Ricimer. I'm not sure who he was. He declares Glucerius a Roman emperor. And what happened next is that Gundobad declares him emperor, but the Eastern Roman Empire doesn't like that, so they declare Julius Nepos emperor. Then Julius Nepos goes to Italy, beats in battle, in some sort of battle, we're not sure, Gundobad and Glucarius, and that's the end of the Emperor Glucarius. I'm not sure if he is killed. I don't remember. I didn't wrote it down. It doesn't really matter. But Julius Nepos wins over Gundobad. And by the way, Gundobad, who is this relative of Ricimer, he goes and he rules the kingdom of Burgundian, of the Burgundians. So again, we have this old relationship where you have the relationship of Ricimer with the Burgundians, with the Suevi. So that's an interesting thing, an interesting fact. What happened next is that Julius Nepos fails to pay his soldiers, which is a great mistake. If you ever do a invasion and if you don't pay your soldiers, you are certainly going to regret it, because the soldiers are going to revolt. So what happens is that Julius Nepos, maybe he owes too much money and he can pay his soldiers, but his Magister Militum does promise to pay off the soldiers, and this person is Orestes. Orestes promised the soldiers, okay, Julius Nepos is not going to pay you, I'm going to pay the money that Julius Nepos is not going to pay you if you support me. And that's exactly what happens. The soldiers revolt against Julius Nepos, and Julius Nepos goes out of Italy. He says, F this, I'm out. And he goes out of Italy. He is not killed. He is not going to be killed, but Orestes successfully boots out Julius Nepos, the Emperor Julius Nepos. And Orestes does what we will expect, which is he declares a new emperor. This emperor is Romulus Augustulus. If you know Roman history, you know that this is the last emperor of Rome, or it is considered by historians the last emperor for poetic reasons. He is considered the last emperor. And Orestes is... The fall of Orestes is funny because he dethroned Julius Nepos by promising to give the money that Julius Nepos didn't want to give the soldiers. But Orestes also fails to pay the soldiers. So that's what happens. Why did that happen? Why did Orestes fails to pay the soldiers? The answer is that I don't know. We are not told. Thomas Hawkins just says that he fails to do that. He fails to pay the soldiers. If I was a betting man, I think that what happens is that Julius Nepos didn't have the money, he didn't have the funds to pay, but Orestes maybe believed that that was not the case, so he promised the soldiers that if they revolted against Julius Nepos, that he will find that money that Julius Nepos was hoarding somewhere. And then when Julius Nepos got into power, he finally noticed that there was no money to be had, and that's why he didn't pay the soldiers. I'm guessing that that's probably what happens, because how ironic it would be for him to come into power, promise money to his soldiers, and then he doesn't pay them. It is silly. In any case, Orestes declares his own son as Augustus as emperor. His son is raised as emperor, but his father, Orestes fails to pay the soldiers the money that he promised. So what happens next is that he's out. He runs, and Odoacer promised Orestes to, protection. He promised him protection. So Orestes decides to go to Odoacer for protection, trying to find some protection, and Odoacer kills him. That's that simple. Then Odoacer looks at the child Romulus Augustulus, and he sent him free. This is how the Roman Empire ends. What does it take to be an emperor? And the answer is that a lot of winning. The last Roman emperors didn't do that. They didn't do a lot of winning, which is why they pretty much failed. We see that, for example, Majorian, he did a lot of winning. He won against the invasion of the Vandals. So when the Vandals tried to get into Italy once again, Majorian won those wars along with Ricimer. Majorian went against the Visigoths and he won those battles, but he didn't win all of the battles, which was necessary. He didn't win the battle against the Vandals. His fleet was burned down and he couldn't invade. So he couldn't win all of the battles. I'm sure that if he was able to do that, probably he would have become one of the greatest Romans of history alongside Trajan, but he didn't. Sadly, he didn't want everything. So to be a Western Roman emperor, you needed to do a lot of winning, and emperors just didn't do that. Avidius, he had the power, but he didn't do a lot of winning. He was a gamble. I don't think that he even tried to win anything. Anthemius was a compromise. Emperor Anthemius was a compromise from Ricimer's part to try to win over the Eastern Roman Empire, but again, he didn't do a lot of winning. He tried to invade the Vandals, he tried to conquer Africa, the province of Africa once again, and he was not successful. And because he was not successful, he broke the relationship between him and Ricimer, and ultimately this little civil war that they had ended up with his death. So to be a Roman emperor, you needed to do a lot of winning, and these Roman emperors didn't do a lot of winning. So what can we expect? Julius Nepos as well, he didn't do a lot of winning. That's not completely true, I guess, because he did win against Gundobad, against Glucerius, but he didn't. Something that I didn't spoke about is that Julius Nepos didn't do a lot of winning as well. So Julius Nepos did fight the Visigoths, but he didn't win per se. What happens is that Julius Nepos went against the Visigoths, and there was a stalemate. I'm not sure what happens, but something happens where Julius Nepos compromises, and he gives away 2 cities to the Visigoths in exchange to leaving him alone. So that was interesting. That's something that I didn't say back when I was speaking about Julius Nepos. So Julius Nepos also didn't do a lot of winning, and that was just a problem, especially when he was ultimately dethroned. Orestes, again, he's Orestes, or more precisely Romulus Augustus, he didn't even do a lot of winning. he went into the throne pretty much, I'm thinking, because of lies, because he believed something. He believed maybe that he will be able to pay the soldiers, and he couldn't. So this is why a lot of people don't like the idea of putting Romulus Augustulus as the last Roman emperor, because in reality he just declares himself emperor, or his father declares him emperor, just because soldiers wanted to pay. But it doesn't work. What does it take to be a Roman emperor? A lot of winning. A lot of winning that the emperors didn't do. So if you want to be a Roman emperor, you also need to do a lot of winning. So hopefully this is helpful. Yeah, this is very helpful. To be a Western Roman emperor, you need to do a lot of winning. Who would have thought?